Tonight, Prime Minister Carney tours Southeast Asia, seeking new trade openings just as, yes, Donald Trump explodes over an Ontario ad featuring, yes, Ronald Reagan.
Then Alberta Premier Danielle Smith legislates teachers back to work using the Notwithstanding Clause, a political gamble that could echo across Canada.
And a look at the CFL playoff race to the Grey Cup, plus how are our Canadian NHL clubs shaping up early this season. From Montreal, I'm Eddie Takalik.
And I'm Gary MacDonald. This is Night Talk Canada, episode 57. Remember to join the conversation, post your opinion on any or all of tonight's issues in the comments. Now let's get started. Prime Minister Mark Carney spent the week in Southeast Asia, courting partners in Singapore, Vietnam, and Malaysia, part of Ottawa's push to deepen Pacific trade. But the visit's headlines were hijacked by none other than Donald Trump's meltdown over an Ontario government ad invoking Ronald Reagan's anti-tariff message. And oh man, Eddie, did he melt down big time, calling it fake, saying it was artificial intelligence used in the ad to produce it. So he had that major meltdown, halted all trade talks with Canada, off, boom, done and over with. And then the next day, he's saying that he's going to impose an additional 10% tariff on everything that has tariffs on it now. I mean, everything. So on his way, I forget where he was going. I think he was heading in the direction of Southeast Asia at that time. Did a brief scrum with reporters on Air Force One, and he was asked again about the ad. And it was interesting how he responded. So let's have a look.
On the flight yesterday, you sent out your Truth Social about the Canada tariffs. Can you walk through when you expect those to take effect? And can I ask why?
We're gonna let them know. Ronald Reagan loved tariffs. He used them sparingly, which he probably would make a mistake. He made a mistake in that. And again, I was the biggest fan of Ronald Reagan, but on finance, on trade, it wasn't his strong suit. But he liked tariffs, and they totally changed that to say that he didn't, because they're catering to the Supreme Court. Because Canada's been ripping us off for a long time, and they're not going to rip us off anymore. Canada has been ripping us off for a long time.
Why?
One of the most difficult countries to deal with has been Canada. As much as I love Canada itself and the people of Canada, they've just had a lot of bad representatives. They did a fake ad yesterday. They were caught. The Ronald Reagan Foundation was the one that caught them. And it was totally the opposite of what they said. So I don't like that. That's dirty pool, and you can't do that. And let me just tell you, they shouldn't have done it. And they've apologized, and they said, we're going to take the ad down. Well, they did it, but they did it very late. They let it play for another 2 nights, and now they took that ad down. So I don't know when it's going to kick in. We'll see, but I don't really want to discuss it. Let's go.
Can I just add, Mr. President, can I just add, this that was an ad run by a provincial government in Canada. Why are you mad at the federal government?
Because whether it's provincial or Canada itself, they all knew exactly what the ad was. The Prime Minister knew, everybody knew. The Prime Minister knew what the ad was before it worked.
Will you see him at APEC? Do you want to meet with him?
I don't want to meet with him. No, I'm not going to be meeting with him for a while. No, I'm very happy with the deal we have right now with Canada. Okay, well, we're going to let it ride.
So his knickers are in a knot, as they would say.
Boy, you know what? I can't remember the last time I heard a human being in one paragraph in one breath lie 5 times. I mean, that was just absolutely mind-boggling. And you know what? That takes a skill and that takes talent. Unbelievable. No one apologized, man. Gary, like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, later, the Prime Minister held a scrum, and he was, of course, the ad and the talks being called off, top of mind for the reporters. And he was asked about the whole situation. And his response, response to a couple of questions. quite interesting indeed. Let's have a listen.
Murray Brewster with CBC News. President Trump says he's canceled these trade talks because he's upset about the Ontario government ad. We've heard from the Business Council of Canada and even some of President Trump's own advisors who suggest the frustration with Canada runs deeper. So is this about the ads or is this about something else?
Well, look, as I say, and there were a series of very detailed, very specific, very comprehensive discussions, negotiations on the areas I just listed to in response to the previous question, up until the point of those ads running. First point. Second point, I would suggest you take the president at his word for his reason. And that is the reason why, from the perspective of the federal government, which I'm responsible, we stand ready to pick up on those discussions when the United States wishes to pick up on those discussions. So those in the room, those exchanging term sheets, those having the discussions about specific areas where we can make mutual progress to the benefit of workers and businesses and communities in our respective countries, had been making progress. Those ads came, the president had the reactions which you have seen, made the decisions that he has made, which, those are his decisions to take, and we're in the situation we're in.
Less than a month ago, you were at the White House. You seemed very cordial, friendly with President Trump. The two of you were joking. You said you were going to walk away with a good deal. He said that we would be very happy. Is the U.S. toying with Canada? And how did your relationship with Donald Trump go south so fast?
It's a question for him.
Have you reached out to him personally at all?
The president knows that I'm available to speak to the president, as I would be, as you would expect. As president of the United States, so of course, make myself available. I make myself available for other world leaders as they wish to. We will both be in APEC. Canada is a member of APEC. We're going to be there, very much so.
So you haven't reached out to the president at all?
The president and I have not spoken since he took this decision.
And you want to chat with him at APEC?
We are ready to have discussions when the Americans wish to have those discussions, but we're not. Obviously, we don't dictate the timing of that.
Did you notice the body language when he said, you should ask the president that?
Yeah.
And just like very curt, and then just the facial expression and the body language. I found it really very interesting as to how he was conveying a message, and obviously, he mentioned this once before, that there's no place for emotions in these kinds of negotiations.
Yes.
And it was like he was kind of trying, he was holding back and still trying to be diplomatic in his response overall. I just found that really very, very interesting, the way that he did handle that. And that was it. She had another part of the question, and he just responded to talking to the president, and and boom, it was game over.
Very, very straight-faced and very serious in terms of his response. And it's almost like I'm not going to say don't call us, we'll call you, but we'll talk to you when you decide to call us, and we're going to go on about our business. The message I got from that, Gary, is, we're going to wait for the president. It's the president's decision. It was the president's decisions, and basically saying, I respect that. And we're not going to wait by the phone. And Mr. President Trump, don't wait by the phone for us to call you. If you want to talk to us, we're ready to talk to you. And in the meantime, we're going to continue doing our work to do what we need to do for evolving Canada's economy beyond the dependency we've had on the United States for years and years and years, which we've talked about on numerous shows. So I just found the way that Prime Minister Carney presented himself, held himself together, and not basically saying on the microphone what his mind was thinking, remained very parliamentarian, remained very diplomatic, what you would typically expect from a leader of a country and an economy as large as ours. Quite the contrary to what we typically see from the United States president and the people within the Republican leadership. And as time passes, you just look at these temper tantrums from El Presidente himself to the commissioner and the ambassador to Canada. It is just unbelievable how unprofessional and how undiplomatic the politicians and leaders of the American government are, and how they portray themselves across the planet. This is just not in Canada. This is happening worldwide. So, on social media platforms, you see all kinds of comments from decent Americans saying, well, why is it that we're not respected elsewhere in the world? What do they see that we don't see? It's almost like you're the tree in the forest. Obviously, you can't see what's going on. We're on the outside in, looking in, and it does not look good. So, I looked at that clip, and I've seen it before, where I don't think President Trump knew where to begin. He was so angry, and even if he wasn't angry, I don't think he's capable of knowing where to begin in terms of responding to some very simple questions the reporters were asking. When you're looking at Ronald Reagan, who's probably one of the most respected and toughest Republicans in the history of the United States, basically saying that what you saw in the advertisement was AI generated and it was a lie, and that Reagan loved tariffs and whatnot. I took the opportunity to review my history and looked at some of these clips and read up on it. He was not a supporter of tariffs, just global. We're going to dump tariffs on everybody, and we'll see what happens at the end of the day. Yes, he did have some tariffs in place which were strategic and targeted, especially when it involved the semiconductor industry. But in general, he did not support. He did not like tariffs, and he did not want to support a widespread deployment of that. So here's Donald Trump lying about what a lot of people think is a hero of the United States, America, and its democracy over the last 249 years, basically dissing Reagan. And I'm just surprised I haven't heard more on the media. And yeah, Gary, I kind of bucked the trend. I did look at Fox News today. Nothing about it, which just floors me that none of this was on Fox News. That at least when I took a quick look at a few episodes today.
Well, just hang on, because I don't have the ad, but I do have an excerpt from that radio address, and I have seen wonderful. The ad, and I can verify myself that the clips that they used in the ad produced on behalf of the Ontario government are clips from the original recording of the radio address, and it was late April 1987. So let's have a look at a bit of this, because there's still more to come, and we do have some comments, and I want to get to those as well, but there's just so much stuff here. Just hang on, here we go.
Now, imposing such tariffs or trade barriers and restrictions of any kind are steps that I am loath to take. And in a moment, I'll mention the sound economic reasons for this, that over the long run, such trade barriers hurt every American worker and consumer. Now, that message of free trade is one I conveyed to Canada's leaders a few weeks ago, and it was warmly received there. Indeed, throughout the world, there's a growing realization that the way to prosperity for all nations is rejecting protectionist legislation and promoting fair and free competition. Now, there are sound historical reasons for this. For those of us who lived through the Great Depression, the memory of the suffering it caused is deep and searing, And today, many economic analysts and historians argue that high tariff legislation passed back in that period, called the Smoot-Hawley tariff, greatly deepened the Depression and prevented economic recovery. You see, at first, when someone says, let's impose tariffs on foreign imports, it looks like they're doing the patriotic thing by protecting American products and jobs. And sometimes for a short while it works, but only for a short time. What eventually occurs is, first, homegrown industries start relying on government protection in the form of high tariffs. They stop competing and stop making the innovative management and technological changes they need to succeed in world markets. And then, while all this is going on, something even worse occurs. High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries and the triggering of fierce trade wars. The result is more and more tariffs, higher and higher trade barriers, and less competition. So soon, because of the prices made artificially high by tariffs that subsidize inefficiency and poor management, people stop buying. Then the worst happens. Markets shrink and collapse, businesses and industries shut down, and millions of people lose their jobs. The memory of all this occurring back in the 30s made me determined when I came to Washington to spare the American people the protectionist legislation that destroys prosperity.
So there you have it. There was nothing fake about that ad and the clips that they used, and there is no way that those clips were used out of context in the ad.
No.
You know? Bang on. And there's no denying that Reagan, who Trump says he looked up to and respected, you know, high respect for him. But there's no question here that he is a free trader, and that, yes, tariffs have a place for a very short span of time. That's it. But he was not all in the way Trump is. Of course, Trump's raising money for the ballroom and a few other things too. So
yeah,
that's the other side of it. Now, I have one more clip that comes out of. I just happened upon this interview. It was a CPAC program that they run in the evenings weekly, and they had a guy by the name of Stephen Schmidt, co-founder of the Save American movement, and he believes the U.S. is a threat to Canada. He's also a former GOP advisor as well, and he believes that the U.S. is a real threat to Canada. So let's have a listen to exactly what he said.
I think the United States has become a profound threat to Canada in the administration of Donald Trump. You have an American president that degrades the United States' most important ally, insults its prime minister, insults the premiers of its provinces, talks about territorial expansion. The United States and Canada are two of the three principal countries that saved the world on the 6th of June, 1944. Donald Trump has tried to snuff out Canadian independence. His ambassador, Pete Hoekstra, is a disgrace. And every Canadian should appreciate that Donald Trump is as much a threat to Canada as he is to the liberty of Americans.
Now, that's a great segue into the whole thing with Hoekstra, the U.S. ambassador to Canada, not one of my favorite people, who just the other day at a closed business session where there were some high rollers from both Canadian and U.S. business communities in the room, and he tore into the Ontario trade representative who works out of Ottawa on behalf of Ontario, tore into him, and apparently he used profanity, and he was, dumping all over Ontario once again for running the ad. I don't know what he's complaining about, because Ontario paid for those ads when they ran on all of the major networks. That's money going into the U.S. He should be happy about that. But anyway, it was a real mess, apparently, behind closed doors. Really, really a mess. And of course, Captain Canada couldn't let it go. He was asked questions about it today at a news conference, and here we go.
And this one is for the Premier. Back to that, dressing down that Pete Hoekstra gave David Patterson. Yeah. What does it say to you that the person who is ostensibly, baking in Canadian culture does not understand at this moment why you ran that Reagan ad and what it is that Ontarians are trying to achieve in our negotiations with the U.S.?
I guess the ambassador, he must understand it. He's been around for forever. When you have someone attacking your province, attacking your country, constantly saying it's a 51st state, trying to take our auto jobs down to the U.S., taking our manufacturing, life science jobs, trying to take our steel jobs, what do they expect me to do? Sit back and roll over like every other person in the world? I'm going to fight like I've never fought before. I said during the election I'm going to protect people, and I will use every tool in my toolbox to protect the people of Ontario and protect the people of Canada. Like, what does he expect? And the intention wasn't to go poke the president in the eye. My intention was to get a conversation going, wake up the Democrats a little bit down there. And my goodness, it woke them up all right. And they're still talking about it on CNN. But I saw a poll on CNN that Canada is way more popular than the president with the American people. We love Americans. I'll tell you, we don't love President Trump. I'll tell you that. And I think he was in the poll I saw on CNN is minus 60. I don't know, minus 60. I don't know how much lower you can get than minus 60. So why doesn't the president start being nice, play nice in the sandbox to his biggest customer in the entire world, and everything's hunky-dory. So let's get on with it.
Premier Jeffrey Globno, just backing up on that point in this confrontation, you made it sound like it's something that the ambassador has to apologize to your representative in Washington about, but really this was a dressing down. This was screaming, yelling, whatever it is, the reports are, in front of a large audience about an ad, an innocuous ad that points out that Ronald Reagan supported free trade that you chose to run. Is this acceptable behavior for a diplomat?
Absolutely unacceptable. I've never heard anything about it. All I'm getting at is I'm not telling him, I'm suggesting that, if you get hot-headed one day, call Dave up and say, I apologize, sorry, got a little heated. So, that as simple as that. People get in disagreements. It's unbecoming of an ambassador. I've never heard of this in my entire life. But the ambassador is a different type of cat. He thinks I'm a different type of cat, but he's a different type of cat as well. So, Pete, do the right thing. Give the guy a call. Let's move on. Enough's enough.
I love him.
I know, it's great. Just great. Now, let's catch up on a couple of comments before we get into a little more discussion on this. Monel says, we are horrible people. Love it. That's right. Remember Trump in his little scrum on Air Force One, Canadians are horrible. Because
Gary, you know what? Apparently. You know what, Gary? You're nasty.
Thank you.
Hey, no problem.
I quite enjoy that, actually. All right, and let's see. Deborah says, if we kissed the ring, bent the knee, gave him a virgin, he would still have found a reason to call off talks. I've lost track. That is so true. Yeah. And let's see. Jen says, it's ironic how Trump labels so much as fake news when many of his own claims are completely unverified or straight out of his imagination. If something is said not in his favor, he is quick to act out of emotion and like a toddler. I think you're being kind as far as the toddler comment.
Yeah.
And
the whole, nice.
Yeah, Greg is here as well. Thanks for the reminder of this at a time when we were both, Gary, in municipal governments. Perhaps tariff-free back then made our jobs much easier. Yeah, we didn't have to deal with tariffs, but we had other things to deal with for sure, Greg. I remember those days. Anyway, so keep the comments coming, folks. It's great to be getting that feedback for sure. Now, Eddie, go ahead.
Yeah, what I was going to say is that's not just today's reaction. I mean, today's reaction from the Trumpster and the last couple of days, and the reaction from Hextra, the ambassador to Canada. This is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the weekly and sometimes daily emotional outbursts because somebody's ego gets bruised. They don't like the way somebody doesn't acknowledge and respect the individuals that are forming this government in Washington. And you know what? I mean, from time to time again, you see psychologists and specialists speak about super narcissistic personalities, the disorders associated with that. And the thing that irates a bully such as that more than anything else is in the public eye when the individual is not listened to, when the individual is not obeyed, when negative comments in terms of the image of said individual become public. They all blow gaskets. I mean, literally, they all blow gaskets. And Trump is the professor and the dean in terms of this type of maniacal outburst when, as Ford put it, somebody punches back. What does Trump expect? People to bow down in front of him all the time? You heard Premier Ford mention, like the other countries are basically bowing down. I'll go one step further than that. I think most of these countries are bowing down in public just from an image perspective, and then continue to go on about business in strengthening their economies without the United States. There hasn't been one signed agreement, which is normally hundreds to 1,000 pages long, signed between two individual countries that basically solidify an agreement beyond just a shake of hands. Not one has been produced yet. So when the United States government or Trump's government says, "Oh, we've got a deal," no, you've got basically some leader in a country saying, "Yeah, you know what? Great, let's do business." That's about the extent of it. There's nothing more. And here we have Prime Minister Carney, who's made the rounds in Europe, and I'm sure he's going to go back. He's making the rounds in the ASEA session, the APAC in the APAC area, making deals, negotiating agreements, and I'm sure you've seen it when Prime Minister Carney was asked about what he was doing out there, and without actually saying it, he was pointing at the United States' inability to be trusted. He came out and said, Canada can be trusted with its agreements. I mean, what a strong statement to be made, and by the same token, pointedly at the United States without actually saying it. But you know what the funny thing is? On American media, you hardly heard anything about that particular statement, which shocked me. I didn't really see anything unless you did, Gary, but that was a pretty bold and direct statement at the United States, which didn't pass across any of the corporate media channels. They were all over media. You can find it very easily with some of the more reputable podcasts in the United States who did bring it up, but nothing was heard on the on mainstream media in the States. So good on Prime Minister Carney for being direct on two fronts. One, in response to President Trump's increase on the tariffs, being very stoic and very determined in his approach. Kudos to Premier Ford and keeping up the stiff upper lip in this particular matter. And good on Prime Minister Carney in doing what he needs to do. And I believe we're going to soon see some of these 1,000-page deals with a lot of these countries that he's been visiting and dealing with in the background to minimize the amount of dependence we have on the United States of America for business. And you know what? That makes good business sense. We're no longer going to be putting all our eggs in one basket. And typically, with a business model, with any successful corporation, you never put your eggs in one basket. So I'm glad that somebody in Canada has actually woken up, smelling the coffee, and realizes what needs to be done to get us back on track. And I'm sure glad that we've actually got somebody whose specialty is global economics. Who better to deal with this than someone that's well versed in this? So yeah, Gary, by the same token, I'm really pissed off and upset of every time El Trumpo opens his mouth along with his stooges. Really upsets me. But then what's really calming for me is when I see the leaders of our provinces, the leader of our country defending your interests, my interests, the interests of the country, and working with the world in evolving our economy and our partnerships with the rest of the world. So that kind of brings sanity and some sense to the chaos that's going on about the world these days.
But there are a couple of areas. First of all, people are starting to really get restless. The Prime Minister traveling around the world, and he has to do that because for 10 years, nothing really happened from a business perspective. Mm-hmm. And he's opening doors, knocking on doors, and we know what that's like. And building those relationships, and you do have to build a relationship and trust. And the best way to do that is, to meet face to face, for sure. But by the same token, something has to come here soon, because, this time next week, we'll all be kind of shaking our heads and trying to figure out what hit us with the budget that's being tabled on Tuesday. True. And, last week, he tried to send the message that sacrifices will have to be made so that we have to cut in one spot to have the money to invest in another spot, long-term investment. And there's no question there's going to have to be a lot of cutting in order to right the ship. However, so there's that aspect of, he still seems to have the support of people, but now people are starting to ask, when are we going to see something tangible? And that's a fair question. That is a fair question. A lot of people don't understand some of these things do take time. There are other things. If you've scored a small success and it's been a quick success, get it out there. Let people know what's going on. Now, the other side of it, Doug Ford came in for some criticism, especially from the various pundits on CBC and CTV and elsewhere, because he did step out with the ad and throw it out there and said, let's go. He wanted to get a message out. He's fighting for his province. And let's face it, Ontario's economy is an engine, the engine for the rest of the Canadian economy as well, with the manufacturing that they have there. And also the largest population, province with the largest population. So he's defending, and he's the guy who's maybe Carney's making the snowballs in the background and getting Doug to throw them, and there's been a lot of talk about Carney the good cop and Doug Ford the bad cop. Well, fine, that's fine. Doug Ford doesn't seem to mind playing the bad cop whatsoever. As a matter of fact, it looks like he quite enjoys it, and full marks to him for that. And then you have Wab Kinew in Manitoba supporting Doug Ford in the ad. And out on the West Coast, you've got Premier David Eby in BC, who is now talking about running some ads of their own related to the softwood lumber issue, an issue which has been dragging on forever, it seems. And it's affecting BC, and it's also affecting New Brunswick, for example, as well. Like one branch of the Irving family has a lot invested in Crown lands and lumber and mills around the province. And they've been pushing as well for some kind of relief on the softwood lumber tariffs for years and years. It's just gone on forever. So, you know, and now some of the pundits are saying, well, we had unity within the country as far as the first ministers were concerned, and that went out the door. It went out the door to a certain degree, but I think you can see that they're ready to circle the wagons, if you will, and put up the good fight if they need to do that again. My biggest concern coming out of this is I've not heard a whole lot of talk lately about any new agreements bringing down interprovincial trade barriers.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, there was talk, there was a bit of action, and probably this time around, earlier this year, a bit more action than we've ever seen. And then all of a sudden, what happened?
Yeah,
we can be one of our best customers as a country. And we still don't seem to be able to get past putting up a barrier here and a barrier there to make it that much more difficult to sell back and forth across the country. I mean, we're Canadians. Why can't we sell to one another without restrictions and special taxes and charges and everything else? Why can't we do that? Why is it so difficult to do that? You know, and that's a trade opportunity as well. And we have to come back and start paying closer attention to that aspect instead of just letting it slide once again. And we do have another comment. There we go. And bring that up. Deborah says, when you are working for the people, your ego should be checked at the door. DJT is the epitome of the weak, overly emotional man boy. I like that. Emotional
good description.
Man boy. It is a good description. Fits him to a T. It really, really, really does fit him to a T. So, yeah.
But you know what? You know what, Gary? I haven't thought about it in quite some time. Actually, I'm glad you brought it up again. What happened to breaking down the trade barriers between the provinces? It's almost like crickets. I mean, is it a case that maybe there is something going on in the background we're not aware of? But that goes hand in hand with what's going on with dealing with the United States, where Canadians are starting to get a little antsy and anxious to actually see something become out of all of this hard work. And this is the important thing. There's a lot of hard work going into dealing with what's happening globally with the economy and dealing with the United States. There's a lot of work that goes into it.
That's right.
But you know what? At some point, you know, us as citizens and voters, we'd like to actually see something. Toss us a large bone, something, so we can actually say, hey, you know what? Our patience was worth the while. Let's see what else this government is going to accomplish in the next 3 to 6 months. And you're right. You figured removing the interprovincial trade barriers would be an easy one and a no-brainer, and let's just get that off the table so we can focus on bigger things. Or are we faced with a situation here that the Carney government is just faced with way too many things that they have to deal with? Number one, they have to deal with what's happened in the world in 2025, and then also have to deal with cleaning up the mess from the carnage over the last 2 terms of the Trudeau government. That is a lot of work for one government to work on. I mean, it really is a lot. So clean up the mess, and plus we have to sustain the country and deal with all this crap that's been thrown at us and the rest of the world. And we have to plan for the next 3 years while running a minority government and working with the opposition to make sure that the government doesn't get overthrown. That is a lot of homework, and that's a lot of work, Gary. But I think you're right. I think you and I talked about this months ago when Carney came into power. One of the things you and I mentioned we really wanted to see and should be a priority was getting rid of the trade barriers between the provinces. Get it done. We've seen a few scraps back and forth. I think there was some deal between Alberta and Quebec, and there was some discussion between Legault and Ford on a couple of items, but nothing tangible. The only thing I have seen right now, to tell you quite honestly, Gary, is that wonderful Moosehead beer you served me not too long ago. So obviously we were able to get it in the province of Quebec, and that's something you didn't see, not too long ago. We'd never see Moosehead beer in Quebec. So you know what? That's the only thing I've actually seen in terms of a trade barrier being removed. I can get Moosehead beer in Quebec now. Thanks for that, Gary. That was delicious, by the way.
That's a step forward, that's for sure. And I noticed that there was Deborah and I were out for a walk a few weeks ago through the Old Port, and there was a Moosehead promotion car down through there as well. So they're around and they're hustling for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyhow, I think we really do have to get more focused on the interprovincial trade barriers, because we can be one of our own best customers, and then everything else that's going on behind the scenes. But the one thing that I'm beginning to hear more of too, Eddie, is the fact that Carney has not been keeping the premiers perhaps updated as often as he should with what's going on behind the scenes. And maybe that's where some of the ruffling of feathers is coming from as well, because they're in the dark. Because we always hear, we're so close to a deal. We were close to a deal when Trump pulled the plug. One of the few things I've heard out of Poilievre's mouth in the last few weeks that remotely hits home is the same thing. Like we were promised a deal by July 21st, and it came and it went, and not unexpected. And ever since then, all we've heard is we're close, we're getting close, we're very close. And apparently this time around, when Trump threw his fit, they were very, very close to having the papers to put in front of Trump and Carney to sign off. But really, was this convenient for Trump to use as an excuse? Because he didn't really, at that point, like the way the negotiations were going, and he was looking for some way to pull out or put the brakes on before that deal was signed. There's that aspect of it too, and that wouldn't surprise me in the least either.
Yeah. But you know what? Then there's the other coin. You know what? Great. Middle of July came, and let's say, hypothetically, we had 1,000-page document signed between the two countries. If Trump's recent fit is any indication on how he runs government, is A, he does not respect any contracts, B, he doesn't respect any laws, and brings us to point C. Even if we had 1,000-page trade agreement, the man has a bowel movement, Gary, and the next day, it's thrown in the garbage. And again, we're left scampering to find alternatives to doing business in the United States, right? So there's always that risk. And you know what? It's a very, very viable and realistic risk that the Canadian government and every government around the world has to contend with. They have to deal with the United States not being consistent and can't be trusted to honor an agreement and the deal. So you know what? I don't mind somebody taking a little bit more time, like Prime Minister Carney taking more time to get a workaround to the inconsistency and the craziness of the United States government, where they just don't honor any deals at all. And that kind of brings me back to the interview of Prime Minister Carney over in Asia, where he says when Canada signs a deal, they can be trusted. So it's, I don't know, Gary. I mean, I reflect on what you said weeks ago to exactly that point. Sign something today, tomorrow it's out the window because God knows why. You know, Trump had a moment of whatever, moment of clarity, probably moment of unclarity, but who the hell knows? So how do you deal with somebody like that? You know, in the business world, typically companies always have horrible customers. There's always one customer that you just can't contend with anymore. What do? You stop doing business with them.
Exactly.
Simple as that. So yeah, I think about that all the time, Gary. When you said you can't depend on any sort of an agreement with the United States because it can change tomorrow, and that's what makes it so difficult.
Okay. Well, I think we'll wrap up that part of it because we have another dandy coming up here in a moment.
Yeah.
Up next, we have Alberta Premier Danielle Smith uses the Notwithstanding Clause to send striking teachers back to work. Now, before though we dig into Smith's Showdown, a quick pause for a recommendation. If you're unhappy with your current internet service provider, cable-based or 5G internet service, check eBox Fiber Internet. Eddie and I have made the switch, and our service has been solid and fast. Check out the affiliate link in the description below, and if you decide to make the change, use one of the promo codes that you find down there, included with the link. Now, I just want to make this clear. This is not a paid sponsorship. This is just a recommendation from yours truly.
Yeah. And you know what, Gary? We might be a quiet country. We might be a very polite country. There's always something interesting going on someplace in our country. Gary, here we are. We're facing a 3-week-old teacher strike. We're facing a 3-week-old teacher strike, and Alberta Premier Danielle Smith invoked the Notwithstanding Clause to force educators back to work, of course, sparking a fierce debate over provincial power and workers' rights.
And she warned about a week, 10 days ago that she might very well bring in legislation to get them back to work because they've been out of school now for 3 weeks. And some of the students today were saying, they're concerned about making up that time, especially some of the students in the higher grades. So they've been out of school for 3 weeks. And it seems, though, that more and more governments at the federal and provincial levels seem to be using the legislated end to a strike to close the issue and move on. And I'm not so sure that that's necessarily a good thing. Yes, strikes are inconvenient, and they create a lot of issues for a lot of people from time to time, and they're hard on business. But by the same token, at least the laws in this country stand now that workers have a right to form a union and workers have a right to strike, to back their demands. And yet, more and more, you're seeing, as I say, at the federal level and the provincial level, governments using legislation to force the sides back to work, and in some cases, to mediation, and hopefully they work it out in the long run. But the strike itself, the impact of the strike has been removed because they're off the picket lines and back at work while the mediation efforts are going on behind the scenes. And I get it, especially at the national level when you have a strike like a railway strike.
Mm-hmm.
When the railways grind to a halt for any reason, but particularly a work stoppage, or the ports grind to a halt because of a work stoppage, that is our supply chain coming to a screeching halt.
Right.
Boom.
Everything stops.
Yeah, exactly. Or, from the airline perspective, the same thing. So the last couple of times that this has happened at the national level, I've thought to myself, if you're going to do this, and effectively remove the impact of these unions, these workers, using their right to strike to back their demands, then why don't you just declare them an essential service and take the right to strike away? And set it up, like you've got mediation, binding arbitration, and that's it. Instead of having this right to strike, but yet if it goes sour and the politicians can't take the heat, then the governing side brings in back to work legislation. At that point, what is the point of having a right to strike? And as I say, especially in the times we're living in right now, the economic situation, the world trade situation, there's no question. Ports and railways in particular are extremely important as far as the supply chain in this country is concerned. And when those one or both of those shut down, we're choked.
Yeah.
We're choked off. And it doesn't take long for the shortages to start popping up on shelves because it's sitting in a container on a ship that can't be unloaded or in a boxcar that can't be shunted off to the siding to be unloaded or moved across the country. So, but now the notwithstanding clause, and here we go again, the notwithstanding clause is becoming a favorite tool of provincial premiers. And of course, Smith seems to, as much as we seem to think at times that she's a Maple MAGA, she also has been very, well, not so much quietly, but just very open about taking a page out of Quebec's book on different things, including unity.
Yeah.
Right? And she's learned from the masters, the provincial politicians in Quebec, playing the unity card, playing this card, playing that card, and using the notwithstanding clause for almost any controversial piece of legislation, so that they can't be challenged. And what happened? That was tabled in the afternoon yesterday. The legislation in Alberta was tabled in the afternoon, and I think they allowed 3 hours for debate, and then the vote, and it was over. Boom. You're going back to work tomorrow, and the little ones are going back to school tomorrow. Today. Now, late development in that, Eddie, I don't know if you saw this, but late this afternoon, the Alberta Federation of Labor, which I saw an interview on the weekend with the head of the Alberta Federation of Labor, and at that point he said, we will respond. Today, he comes out and really takes a shot at the government for this and says, we are going to start planning for a general strike in Alberta. I'm not saying we're hitting the lines right away, but we are going to start planning for that eventuality happening. Now, the president of the Teachers Association in Alberta, Jason Schilling, met with reporters outside the legislature yesterday afternoon, just after the legislation was tabled, and had this to say about it.
We saw this government, instead of finding a negotiated path towards a settlement that respects teachers, students, and their families, we saw a government bully. We saw a government use the legislature to ram through what they feel is a fair settlement, and then use the notwithstanding clause to prohibit the rights of teachers. And this is a broader conversation for all Albertans. If they're willing to do this for teachers around collective bargaining, for our schools, for our students, for the people who work with them, then they're willing to do it for everybody in this province. And that's not hyperbole. What you saw in there today was a travesty of our legislature. It's a travesty to our democracy. They're ramming through this bill in one evening so that they can put forward what they want to see. But they are not willing to have any further speculation around how to address the issues. And of course, the bill just came out, so we've not had time to actually read and see the specifics of it, to see just exactly what this bill will entitle. It'll take us some time to further analyze this, and then we'll announce our next steps after that.
And just on another note, did you notice count them two, CBC microphones at the podium?
Yes, I did.
Our tax dollars at work.
Mm-hmm. Well, Gary, you know what? It's this whole business about the notwithstanding clauses that governments have within their own provincial laws and legislatures, where they can actually use them and enact them, which I have a problem with, because, as demonstrated in Quebec, where they use it willy-nilly, especially when it comes down to language issues in this province, unjustifiably used. And here we have the province of Alberta also pulling that trump card, and like you were saying, they learned from the best here in Quebec, doing the same thing. Where does this stop? I mean, can every other province include in their legislature an opportunity to play their trump card and use notwithstanding laws and push people around? I personally think this is absolutely wrong, and this should not be part of anybody's toolbox, as Ford said. In terms of invoking a notwithstanding, it basically says, yeah, we understand it's a law, but here's my go get out of jail free card, and we're going to do what we please. I personally think it's wrong. Most of the people I've spoken to think it's wrong using such a legal opportunity to get around and circumvent doing business or negotiating or doing the hard work, and just basically saying, okay, great, we're going to invoke this, and we're going to debate it one night, and it's going to become law tomorrow. So too bad, teachers of Alberta. I personally think it's absolutely wrong. It renders the right to strike and the right to use your unions to represent you, to make a better living, to get paid a little more in terms of benefit availability. Because look, you know what? We have essential services, right? Which have to be clearly defined what those are, and then you have the necessary laws to ensure that whoever's working in an industry or a service that's considered essential services, that you just can't strike, because it'll paralyze a country or paralyze a province. And this should not be a widespread thing, Gary. We know what the critical services are within a province or a city, right? This should not be a widespread thing. Look, Canada Post, I'm sorry, man, I just don't see that as a thoroughly essential service, because there are other alternatives to that, plain and simple. Teachers, boy, I don't know about that one. Is that considered an essential service? Kids stay home for 2 or 3 months. It's going to put a little, it's going to make it difficult for the parents. They have to adjust, get the, babysitters and whatnot. Is it an essential service? Maybe over X amount of time, but they've been on strike, 2.5, 3 weeks? I don't think it's time to basically pull out the trump card and basically say, we've had enough. You know what? We don't want to deal with you anymore. You're going back to work. I personally think that what Alberta did was wrong. At least the timing of it was completely wrong. They just didn't give enough time to negotiate. And look, this is not something new for Premier Smith. They've been tackling and haggling with this for years. Okay, now that it's actually come to fruition, you're actually going to do something. And what is that something? You're basically legislating people and using that notwithstanding clause to force people back to work. I just think it was a wrong move, and it's going to set an ugly precedent for the province of Alberta. And here's the worst thing.
And across
she learned
the
from
country,
Quebec. Yeah, exactly. She learned from Quebec. Yeah, she learned from Quebec, right? And she's invoking her right to use the notwithstanding clause. Well, you know what? Other provinces are looking at this and saying, "Hey, wait a minute. I got all kinds of problems here I can solve here by pushing through a notwithstanding clause. This will actually cause hell for the rest of the country, because now she's along with Legault and the previous administrations in Quebec, along with Alberta, and they're both heavy hitters. They're setting a very, very dangerous precedent in this country. And look, you mentioned that the individual, I forget his name, I'm sorry, is basically speaking general strike. Do you know what a general strike is, Gary?
Oh yes, I've been
That is just
one.
That's considered revolution, But if that's what it takes, for the public to apply pressure to the local government, more power to them. It hurts me and it hurts everyone else, and obviously it's something that could have been avoided. But look, I think the first salvo was fired. Premier Smith fired the first salvo, and I think what's happening now, she's going to feel the consequences of the decision she just made. Not just consequences in Alberta, but like you said, for the rest of Canada moving forward.
Yeah. Again, if you're going to continue legislating people back to work, then just take the right to strike away, because you're doing it anyway, and save everybody the time and the effort that goes into these protracted negotiations. And this is one thing that gets to me. A lot of these contracts, especially government contracts, they're negotiating a contract that expired like 2 years ago. And 2 years later, you're still in negotiations. Now, which side is not taking this seriously?
Seriously, correct.
And I mean, it's anybody's guess as to which side is not taking it seriously. Why do they allow this to go on? And I get the frustration that you see in people who have their union leaders working to negotiate a contract, and they're not getting anywhere with it. And it goes on for a year, it goes on for 2 years, and by the time they get the deal signed, and I know I can remember this with a couple of contracts in New Brunswick. By the time they got the deal signed and enforced, the contract was up. It was time for a new contract, because it was a 2-year contract or whatever, and it took 2 years to get a new contract negotiated, signed off on, and it had already expired, or expired within a month or two, and they were back at the negotiating table. That makes absolutely no sense. None.
Yeah. Well, especially when a government changes hands. I mean, this was in the hands of Premier Smith's predecessor. Obviously, did nothing with it, and then we'll let the next administration deal with it, right? There's that problem as well, and that's what happens when you have negotiations just take way too long, and they start late and they just drag them on for no reason, and then what? You do something like what Premier Smith just did, legislating teachers back to work. I mean, a profession like teaching is tough enough to recruit. To recruit teachers is tough enough. Why don't we just piss them off at the same time? And they're really going to do a bang up job. I don't know, Gary. It's just the wrong thing to do, and I think it was a disrespectful slap in the face to teachers, as you and I have very often seen as well throughout the country. Teachers typically get a disrespectful slap in the face. Them along with our nurses in the healthcare system. They too go through the same crap go through the same crap with provincial governments, where they're completely disrespected. Their unions are disrespected to look at demands, and it's very simple things. They're looking at balance of life, work-life balance. They're looking for salaries that actually befit the profession and the work they're actually doing. But yet, governments consistently disrespect them by dragging out talks. When was the last time you actually heard a government say, either at federal or at provincial level, that basically say, oh, you know what, this contract is up for renewal in a year's time. we've already made remarkable progress and actually signed something before the contract is over. I'd love to see that. To me, that's government in action. Not wait and just drag your feet on these things. It's completely ridiculous. I mean, look, I'm sure we're not the only country that has to deal with this thing, but it just doesn't make any sense. And then give them what they were asking for in the first place later. Yeah.
And by the time they get their 3% raise, cost of living has gone up double that, and they're still behind the eight ball from a financial standpoint, and that's not right either. But anyway, it's going to be interesting to see how far the Alberta Federation of Labor pushes this, and if they do go ahead with some kind of a general strike, I would not be the least bit surprised to see labor federations from across the country sending support. Big time.
Yeah.
Boots on the ground kind of attempt. So now we have a comment on this one as well. And let's get in there. We go. And Deborah says, what good is having our Charter of Rights if government has an out? It is a false sense of security for the average Canadian. You know, that's a really good point. I never thought of it from that perspective before.
Yeah.
Never really thought of it from that perspective at all. Am I going to lose my voice? Am I 16 and my voice is changing? Excuse me. Anyway, we'll keep an eye on this one and see exactly what comes out of it as far as the government's response, Premier Smith's response to the threat of a general strike made by the Alberta Federation of Labor, and also see what comes from labor federations across the country as to their concerns as, does it become has a dangerous precedent been set that's going to erode even more so workers' rights. And is this the beginning of the end for unions?
Yeah, I think you're right, Gary. The retaliation on this is going to be fairly swift, I think.
Well, if I'm a union person, I think it has to be.
Yeah.
You've got to be in their face right out of the gate, because now it's going to be very easy. And other premiers, I think Doug Ford has used it in Ontario once or twice. Scott Moe in Saskatchewan was threatening to use it over the uproar with in schools with the using the kids coming out and wanting to use, they felt more of it, the other sex, and wanted to use a name for the other sex in school and things like that, much the same as New Brunswick. And he threatened to use it in that situation, but they managed to work that out. I guess it's been at least resolved for the time being, as it was in New Brunswick as well. Of course, that helped. That was one of the factors that helped defeat the Conservative government in New Brunswick a year ago. So there is that as well. All right. I think we shall move along, Eddie, because time is getting away from us here. And what we will do is, well, guess what's coming up? Eddie's Sports Pulse returns with a look at the CFL playoff rounds leading to the Grey Cup and how Canadian teams are doing in the early NHL season. First, though, if you're thinking about moving your website from a US-based service, have a look at Web Hosting Canada. Why? Well, it's a Montreal-based company offering a complete range of web services with reasonable pricing. Now, I've been a satisfied customer for almost 5 years now. It's hard to believe. You can get more information by clicking the affiliate link below. And again, this is not a paid sponsorship, merely a recommendation from yours truly. Okay. Now,
well, Gary, what better way to get away from the turmoil of this world, turmoil out of North America, and get your mind away from the turmoil in the United States than sports and the love of sports. And there's all kinds of sporting activity going on here in North America. And Gary, before I get into the CFL or the NHL, I just want to mention that, of course, our Toronto Blue Jays yesterday tied the World Series with the Los Angeles Dodgers, and they're tied 2-2. And I believe they go back to the field later on this afternoon. So far it's been quite an exciting World Series with the Blue Jays representing a Canadian team, and of course against the world famous Los Angeles Dodgers. And it's been a very exciting series so far, and a great way to turn off to the rest of the world and just enjoy the camaraderie of sports in stadium, in your friend's living room, then watching television, having a few beer, and just enjoying sports in general. So 2-2 tie, and we'll I think by this time next week we'll have a World Series winner, Gary. So go Blue Jays, right?
Yeah, well, any way you look at it, the World Series will be won on Canadian soil for the first time since 1993.
Correct. And if you want to look at a city change in there's a post that's been going on in Facebook where you take a look at downtown Toronto in 1993 and 1994, and then you look at downtown Toronto today, and wow, you want to talk about an economic engine change in terms of where the economic might is of the country. Just look at downtown Toronto today. So beautiful city, beautiful changes, and I think Toronto being able to field a team on the North American stage in one of the most popular sports in the United States in baseball, I think it's just a wonderful thing for the city of Toronto. And also next year, the city of Toronto is also going to be hosting some of the World Cup soccer games. So Toronto keeps on being right on top there in terms of sporting events. So good on them. CFL, Gary, the 112th Grey Cup stage is being set, and this year's Grey Cup is being played in Winnipeg. Hopefully the weather will be mild, and that climate change will keep the temperature to playable levels, but I wouldn't hold my breath. This is Winnipeg, and you get winter in a moment's notice, but it is being played in Winnipeg, and what a season in the CFL it's been. The final playoff positions, Gary, didn't actually get determined until the last few games last weekend, and we're all set. We're ready to go. In our two divisions, right? A couple of surprises here. The Toronto Argonauts, who won the Grey Cup last year, did not make it to the playoffs this year. As a matter of fact, they performed so poorly this year, along with the Ottawa Redblacks, that one of the teams from the Western Division, the fourth place team, actually made it into the playoffs, playing the third place spot, replacing Toronto Argonauts. So here's the setup. The Hamilton Tiger Cats got a bye this upcoming weekend, ending up first place in the Eastern Division, and the juggernaut, the Saskatchewan Roughriders, who happen to be the favorites to take it this year, ended up in first place in the Western Division. So this upcoming weekend is going to be a couple of great grudge matches. The Montreal Alouettes are going to be hosting the Winnipeg Blue Bombers for the right to advance to play the Hamilton Tiger Cats, and they're playing in beautiful Molson Stadium. And I don't know if our listeners across Canada and the United States realize the beauty of Molson Stadium. I mean, this stadium is remarkable. It's beautiful, set in downtown Montreal, built into Mount Royal, the prestigious beauty that is right in the middle of our city. Leaves changing colors, the crisp fall air. No better place for football in the fall than Molson Stadium throughout the country. So it's going to be a wonderful game. I think it's going to be a very close game. These two teams hate each other, which is great for football. And we're going to see two excellent quarterbacks going at each other. Jason Alexander from the Montreal Alouettes, he actually set a league record for a rookie winning 9 or 10 games straight before he just lost. In this last game, they lost against Winnipeg. Montreal and Winnipeg were pretty much Montreal secured a playoff spot, so they didn't necessarily have to field the best team because they were not going to catch a Target Cats in first place. So you know what? We'll give Jason Alexander the benefit of the doubt. He did really great this year. So it's going to be a great game. Montreal and Winnipeg next this upcoming November 1st. And then in the West, we've got the British Columbia Lions are going to be playing the Calgary Stampeders. Now, nothing separated these two teams. They both had equal records of 11-7. They did really well on the field in terms of point scoring, and that's going to be a pretty good grudge match. And British Columbia Lions, they did extremely well this year. They struggled a little bit defensively, but that should be a great match. Winner between the BC Lions and the Calgary Stampeders is going to play the Saskatchewan Roughriders, and it's really setting itself up to be one of the most talked about playoff runs in recent history for the CFL, because all of these teams can compete with each other. They can split the games between each other. The statistics are relatively the same, and in the CFL, most of these playoff games and most of the Grey Cup games are very entertaining, Gary, and they usually go down to the last 2 minutes of the game. In comparison to some of the blowouts we've seen in the NFL in recent years. So I love CFL football. Great time to be a Canadian Football League fan. And I think everybody from coast to coast is, tune into the CFL. It's a great sport. It's a great event. If you can get tickets, go see a game, support the teams. And the Grey Cup is, just for everyone's notice, is going to be played on the 18th, I believe. No, Sunday the 16th at 6 p.m. In Winnipeg. So that's the stage for the CFL. And you know what? Go Montreal Alouettes. And I would like to see a Montreal Alouettes Saskatchewan Roughrider Grey Cup game, and we'll see how we go there.
Alrighty. Now, I don't know if Greg Zed's still here, but I remember when you did your NHL preview.
Yeah.
He made mention that Eddie did just stayed with the Canadian teams. He did not mention my mighty Bruins.
No, he did not. And you know what? How about I start off our piece today about the NHL, Gary, and I'll throw in a non-Canadian team just for Greg's benefit. Greg, I'm actually looking at the Atlantic Division statistics here, and my friend, the Boston Bruins are in last place right now. So we're looking at about which is probably the reason why I didn't make mention of them back a few weeks ago. But right now, 1/8 of the season has gone through. It's still way too early to make any sense of who's going to end up in a playoff position or not. But quite a few surprises, both to some of the sports broadcasters across the country and even to myself. Some surprises and some not so much of a surprise. From a Canadian team perspective, Gary, I had mentioned that the Calgary Flames were going to struggle a little bit out in the West, and so would the Vancouver Canucks if they didn't get their ducks in order in terms of their dressing room issues. And lo and behold, in the Pacific Division where they both reside, their Vancouver Canucks are in 6th place, and the Calgary Flames are in 8th place, and I believe they're actually last in the Western Division. So they're not doing too hot, Gary, to tell you the truth. The Edmonton Oilers, as they were last year, a little bit of a slow start, but they're certainly in 4th place right now in the Pacific Division. And I really am eager to talk about the East, Gary, and the Ottawa Senators, the up-and-coming team, your beloved Toronto Maple Leafs, Gary, and my beloved Montreal Canadiens, Gary. Let's talk about those teams. I am so surprised that the top team in the Atlantic Division are the Montreal Canadiens with 16 points. And Gary, these guys, they are they are icing the youngest team in the NHL again for the second straight season. But the kids seem to be gelling and playing extremely well for each other. And they're actually in first place right now with 16 points in the Atlantic Division.
Eddie,
yeah.
Is this year 5 of the 5-year building plan?
I believe. Yeah, this is year 5, if I'm not mistaken.
So it's really starting to come together for them.
Yeah, it started coming together for them at the tail end of last season, where they actually unexpectedly made the playoffs. Although they did predict they might be in the mix, they actually made it into the first round, and they got handled very, very well. I forget who they played against. Actually, Washington Capitals. The Canadians had no chance because of their lack of experience, but that's experience under their belt. They made they got rid of a few players, made some really key acquisitions again, and they seem to be doing pretty good. They're doing actually very well. And I was really thinking the Toronto Maple Leafs would be on top of the pile, but my worry was with the trade of Mitch Marner to the Las Vegas Knights, how the core four would actually perform without one of their star players. And they seem to be struggling a little bit, Gary, coming out of the gate. They're only 5-4. They're 5 points behind the Montreal. They're 5 points behind the Montreal Canadiens, which is very, very uncharacteristic of the Toronto Maple Leafs. But then again, you know what? We're very, very early in the season, and it's injury here, injury there, trade here, trade there, controversy here, controversy there. That's how much of a thin line it is to actually make the playoffs. Every win counts, and I think the difference right now between in the Montreal Canadiens dressing room is last year I think they lost 24 games by 1 goal, and that is a very, very fine margin to lose by. And in fact, what's happening now are the Montreal Canadiens are converting on those and winning by 1 goal. They're not blowing the competition out of the water, but they are winning games, and that's the important thing. So we'll see how that fans out. And from the Toronto Maple Leafs perspective, I guess they're still trying to re-identify themselves and get a groove going without Mitch Marner. And the early indications are that Austin Matthews, the star player for the Toronto Maple Leafs, who scored 60-plus goals the year before, he is struggling this year. Is that because he no longer has Mitch Marner on his line feeding him the passes to score the goals? I really don't know, but he's definitely struggling. And the last statistics I looked at, Gary, if you're looking at point scorers in the NHL, the first one is Jack Eichel. He's got 19 total points for the Las Vegas Knights. The first Canadian-based team player in 7th place in scoring is Nick Suzuki from the Montreal Canadiens. He's got 16 points. Nylander from the Leafs he's in 13th place. Austin Matthews is 82nd place in terms of goal scorers now. That's way behind his usual pace. Maybe he's playing hurt. I don't know, but I certainly hope that the Maple Leafs can actually pick up the pace a little bit, because there's nothing more I'd like to see, Gary, is a Montreal Canadian and Toronto Maple Leaf playoff series again. Yeah. I'd love to see that. Yeah, and I'm not going to forget about the Ottawa Senators. They're hanging in there. I think they're tied with the Toronto Maple Leafs, as a matter of fact, for the 3rd place in the Atlantic Division. They also have a 5-5 record with 1 overtime loss. And the Ottawa Senators are playing pretty decent hockey. So you know what? I think once we get to the Christmas season, the Christmas break, Gary, that's usually the telltale sign of where teams are in terms of their drive for the Stanley Cup come December. And historically, historically for the Montreal Canadiens, December is their make and break month. Sometimes they go into December high on a horse, and you know what? We're thinking about playoffs and a drive for the Stanley Cup, where December and early January roll around and they just totally self-destruct historically. So I hope that's not going to be the case for these kids, and that they'll be able to get through the December doldrums and take the Maple Leafs along with them into the Stanley Cup playoffs come April. So that's pretty much the update for hockey. Plenty of sports to go around over the next couple of weeks, ladies and gentlemen. Get away from the perils of the world. Indulge yourself in some great sports. We've got CFL action. We have NHL action. And over the next week, of course, we got the baseball action in one more game in Los Angeles and a couple of games in Toronto, I hope.
Yeah. And I was just looking to see if there was a score showing for the game. I don't see a score.
Oh, yeah.
But the Jays started the
LA
game.
time, right?
Yeah, the Jays started the game with back-to-back home runs. So.
Oh, okay.
That may be,
that works for me.
Maybe a good sign. Yep, absolutely, it does for sure. So that's a wrap on Eddie's Sports Pulse. Back for this this season, and we'll have to throw in the Bruins once in a while for Mr. Zed. And of course,
yes, I will do that.
Special attention to the Canucks for Joe as well. So
yes.
So many people that we must look after.
Yeah. Well,
go ahead.
Yeah. Well, Joe's definitely a BC Lion fan. He's a Vancouver Canuck fan. So at least he's got one team in the mix right now this upcoming weekend. And I know he's an avid Vancouver Canuck fan, but I know he's been disappointed as many times as I have over the last 20 years with the Habs. So hopefully they can get out of the doldrums and actually make it into the playoffs this year. He'll be a happy camper.
There you go. And with that, it is time to wrap up for this week. Carney's Trade Trip, Smith's Showdown, and Eddie's Sports Pulse. Canada's Week through 3 lenses: politics, power, and play.
And join us next week for another round of real conversation and sharp insight. I'm Eddie Tekalik. Have a good night.
And please remember to like and subscribe on YouTube and follow. We do need more followers on Facebook. Follow and share us on Facebook. And if you are watching the replay, leave a comment and let us know your thoughts on any or all of the topics. It really does help to expose our stream and channel to more people who are like you. And you can also find us on, are you ready? YouTube Shorts, Facebook Reels, Instagram, and of all places, TikTok. What more could you ask for? Night Talk Canada. Honest, unfiltered Canadian, the conversation we should be having, returns in 7 days. I'm Gary MacDonald. Good night.
Good night.